home for podcasts and original music.
The Zagnif One Radio Network.
Are taking on the number 21 Texas Longhorns. I'm still wondering when they're gonna be back. Sam Ellinger said they were gonna be back like 3 years ago.
Just comes to mind on that list that you're like, like this, they could shock the world. Nathan,
you want this? Hold
Nathan,
on.
Nathan, wait a minute, stop it, Skip.
How are we looking at this? Is this a walk off or is this gonna be like the Florida game?
Bama about 3 touchdowns.
Here we go. Get your popcorn ready.
What's the big thing?
Hey gang, how's everybody doing? It's your boy Mr. Fingaz, one half of the cast of This Week in SEC Football podcast, coming to you from Zagnif Central with your NCAA Football Week 7 review. First of all, we're going to make our way to Austin, Texas, where the Oklahoma State Cowboys, ranked number 12, went in to do battle with the number 25 Longhorns. We're back! Well, Sam, are you back? Really? That's the big question, because it didn't look like it, because it just went exactly like we thought it did. Texas gives up a double-digit lead for the second week in a row to fall to the Pokes 32-34. The Longhorns fall to 4-3 on the season. And we're going to move this thing over. Speaking of Oklahoma State, we're coming over to Norman, Oklahoma, where the number 4 Sooners look rejuvenated with Caleb Willams behind center. And that's actually Caleb Willams. My apologies. The freshman signal caller threw 4 touchdowns. He ran for another, and Kennedy Brooks added a $153 and another touchdown. OU easily defeats TCU to remain undefeated. However, Horned Frogs quarterback Max Duggan, that kid's no joke, because he threw for 346 yards on 30 attempts with 4 touchdowns, and that was in a loss. So TCU, always a tough bugger, but OU comes out with the win. Moving on, the Tigers of Auburn go down to Arkansas to take on the number 17 Razorbacks. Now, there's been a lot of speculation, and some of it from me about Bo Nix as to whether or not he's the kid for the job. Sometimes he's good, sometimes he's not. He's kind of like an Almond Joy or a Mounds. Those of you old enough to get that reference, is probably your bedtime right now. But this week, he put all that talk to rest, at least for this week, because he threw for 292 yards and 2 touchdowns and added a rushing touchdown for good measure. They took down the Razorbacks 38-23. The Razorbacks have lost their 3rd straight, and they have fallen to 4-3 overall. They're currently 1-3 in conference play. Heading on down to Missouri, the Aggies are still on a tear. They are fresh off last week's huge win over the Crimson Tide. Let me tell you, that was a huge win for A&M. They really needed it, and now it has sparked some rejuvenation in the Jimbo Fisher's crew. Running back Isaiah Spiller ran for 168 yards and a touchdown. Devin Arcane, he added 2 more. And Zach Calzada, that quarterback, he's turning out to be something decent. He added another pair of touchdowns as A&M completely dismantled Missouri 35-14. The Aggies now 5-2 overall. Speaking of the Crimson Tide, man, I tell you what, I couldn't have been more surprised than anybody that Texas A&M jumped up and hit Bama in the mouth. Now, we all know it doesn't matter how great you are, you always lose one. There's always teams that think about the 85 Bears. They lost the game. The 07 Patriots ran the table through the regular season and the playoffs, only to get beat by Eli Manning, who backed into the playoffs on a wild card bid. It happens all the time. This was the one that we were not expecting. Bama went home. They licked their wounds. They reloaded, and they came out and they unloaded full tilt boogie on Mississippi State yesterday. And when I say full tilt boogie, this game got out of control real quick. Bama held Mississippi State to 0 touchdowns. 3 field goals were all they were able to muster. It was 21-6 at halftime. They never let off the throttle. Missouri's quarterback threw for 300 yards, and they still only were able to muster 9 points. Now, the fact that he threw 3 interceptions might have had a little something to do with that also. Will Anderson from Alabama, 4 sacks in one game. It's just 49-9. Essentially, that's all I can say about that. Bama just whooped them and whooped them and whooped them some more. Bryce Young threw for 348 yards and 4 touchdowns. And Brian Robinson, the beast, he had 2 touchdowns of his own. Now, see, this is exactly why you don't want to piss off Nick Saban. I think that anyway, yeah, you just don't want to piss off Nick Saban because you get a lot of them.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
So, yeah, Alabama rolls over Mississippi State 49-9. Now, moving on to the next game. If I told you that the collective record of 2 teams in a football game, their conference record was 0-6, would you expect anything out of it? Probably not. And I'm pretty sure when everybody saw on the schedule that Vandy was playing in South Carolina, they weren't expecting anything out of this game other than, this is another game just like North Texas playing Missouri last week. Turn it on if you want some background noise. Well, one thing was definitely consistent and remained constant in this game. Vandy is still Vandy, and they're gonna Vandy. They were trailing in the third quarter, kicked the field goal to take the lead, and then in the fourth quarter, managed to score a touchdown to extend their lead to 20-14 with 1 minute and 36 seconds left. 1 minute and 36 seconds left. You figure, Vandy's got this thing in the bag. All they have to do is hold them. That's all they got to do is hold them 1 minute and 38 seconds. Surely they can do that. That's 3 plays with a 40-second time clock. Not so much. Yeah, so South Carolina just marched down the field, 8 plays, 75 yards to score the go-ahead touchdown and win 21-20. That's all I have to say about that. I'm not even going to – it's Vandy. They did what they did. Oh, Dan Mullen, we had such high hopes for you this year. You really did show up strong against Bama, and we thought that it would be more competitive out of you and your squad this year. And yeah. So last week, I almost said last year. So last week, I was thinking about throwing sneakers. That was last year. Forgive me. Last week, they lose to Kentucky, and that one was a bit of a shocker, even though at that time Kentucky was 5-0. They lost to Kentucky. And then this week, they start 2 starting quarterbacks. They started both Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson, and they each threw 2 picks apiece. 2 starting quarterbacks throwing 4 interceptions does not equal a winning formula. LSU beats Florida in the Bayou 49-42. Both teams are now at 4-3. Playoff hopes, or at least SEC championship hopes, very iffy for both. Now we're on to our game of the week. This was the week that everybody was anticipating. Every game day program that could exist was in Athens. I mean, Paul Finnenbaum was down in front of the bookstore going, how does Bama's loss affect Georgia's playoff chances, or how do you feel that affects things? It was a really big deal. 2 SEC teams, 6-0. First time Kentucky started with a 6-0 record since I think 1950. SEC East playoff game, SEC championship game berth potentially on the line with this game. Kentucky comes down to Athens, number 11 versus number 1. Killer offense versus killer defense. And in the first quarter, there was a whole bunch of adrenaline going on. There was no scoring. I don't have to recap it for you. You saw the game. But once the second quarter rolled around, yes, Kentucky did manage to score a touchdown from the red zone, and I could see it on the defense's faces. They were really pissed off about that. But once The second quarter rolled around, the scoring began. The mailman, Stetson Bennett, 250 yards, 3 touchdowns. Brock Bowers really showed out, 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that defense, even though they gave up a couple of touchdowns, they showed out. Blocked point after attempt, blocked field goal attempt. They held the SEC's leading rusher, Chris Rodriguez, who is a legitimate beast, to 7 whole yards during that game. Georgia on top, 30-13, moves on to 7-0. Kentucky to 6-1, and it ain't over yet, folks. But we know right now that Georgia's in the driver's seat. This brings us to, this was just, I don't even know what to say. This was a weird game. I mean, the game itself wasn't weird. It was just the stuff that happened afterwards. You know, Ole Miss goes down to Knoxville, SEC, late night game under the lights, you know, on the big primetime screen. And Tennessee was feeling pretty good about themselves. Old folks had a saying. They used to call it smelling themselves. They won it. So Tennessee won a couple of games by more than 20 points back to back. And they got to smelling themselves. And they were feeling pretty good coming into this game. Well, I'm going to tell you what happens when you get to smelling yourself. Sometimes you get a whiff of something you don't like. And that something they didn't like was Matt Corral. Because let me tell you, that boy showed out. 231 yards, 2 touchdowns. And he ran for 195 on the ground. He accounted for almost 430 yards of total offense by himself with his arm and his feet. And that was basically the determining factor. Now, let's just go ahead and say this. This is where it gets weird. In the fourth quarter, Tennessee is driving. And it was up to the refs where to spot the ball on what would have been a crucial first down for the Volunteers. And as things would, hold on a second. I got somebody, dude, what are you, man, I'm trying to do, I'm in the middle of doing a podcast right now, bro. No, man, I'm doing a podcast right now. You need to get, did you really just, this really happened. This really happened. I can't believe this. I guess he's still a little salty about last night. Who? Well, yeah, something along those lines happened. Referee spotted the ball, said they were short of the first down, and it turned into a Kirk Franklin song from the 90s. There was stuff raining down on everybody. From the student section, there were water bottles. There were, mustard bottles. Lane Kiffin got hit by a golf ball. They had to delay the game for 20 minutes. The Tennessee cheerleaders and band, they were hitting their own band. They were throwing stuff out on the field. 20 minutes, the game was delayed. And there was less than 2 minutes or less than a minute left in the game, which really made no sense whatsoever as to why they would hold the game up that long. But Ole Miss closed the game out. They win 31-26. I'm pretty sure there were some arrests because I did see footage of the police, and you see the footage on your screen. There was footage of the police up in the stands ushering people out, and I'm sure some folks got some silver bracelets on the way out. But yeah, that was really, really strange. I don't even know what to say about that, y'all. I'm sorry for the interruption. We're going to keep the show going, but before we go another further, we need to take a quick pause for the cause and show you our sponsors. Let our sponsors do what they do. I'm still messed up. A mustard bottle? Really? Who in a podcast? I don't get it. Anyway, we're going to take a quick pause for the cause. We'll be right back. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Talking to you. Watching this video right now. Stop what you're doing for a second. Just listen to what I got to tell you. How would you like access to behind-the-scenes content, bonus content, extra content before anybody gets to see it, and grab some snazzy Zagnif Productions merch, like this comfortable-looking t-shirt right here, or this snazzy polo? Yes, I know it's wrinkled. I have an iron. It just came out of the washing machine. Shut it. Or this very, very snazzy-looking pair of shoes right here. Well, you can do all of that. Some of those for as little as $5 a month. Our goal right now by the end of November is to be up to 10 patron sponsors for the $5 package. We also have a $15 package, a $25 package. They go all the way up to $50. And each one of them has different levels of access to the content that we're creating. And you guys know we've been working really hard to put out some quality content. We've got the radio station coming, and that's getting ready to do some things for you here. So zip on over today to www.patreon.com/Zagnif Productions and sign up today. And thank you so much for your support.
We're sorry, the number you
This
have
hurts.
dialed is
Hold on,
not
I gotta
in
hold it.
service at this time.
Is it done? Is it? Okay. Okay. See you later. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again. Mr. Fingaz, one half of the This Week in SEC Football Duo. Shouts out to my partner in crime, my co-host, Sean, the Shout-Out King. Spencer, we are live on Thursdays on Facebook under the group Let's Talk College Football. Every Thursday, we broadcast between 6 and 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, that's not to be wishy-washy. That's just based on what time the both of us get off work that day. But as soon as we get home and get settled, we hop on and we give you guys a show. We run over the review for the week. We run over the injuries for the next week, the key players and keys to the game and all that good kind of stuff. And every now and again, we'll get a little silly. Anyway, we hope that you will join us. The video replay is on Zagnif Productions, Zagnif 1 on YouTube. And if you don't have time to watch, but you got time to listen, the replays are always available on Zagnif 1 Radio Network. We're going to move on to our next segment here, ladies and gentlemen. And we're just going to talk about some things that I'm still messed up over that mustard bottle. Sorry about that. In other news, around the horn, huge upset, number 2 Iowa, and I watched that game against Penn State. That was a dogfight, but Iowa dug in, made their way up to number 2. I said, man, they're probably in the driver's seat. Well, unranked Purdue comes to town, knocks them off 24-7. And now they have fallen. As of the time of this broadcast being recorded, they are now number 11 in the AP polls. There's going to have to be a whole lot of moving parts for them to make their way close back enough to get into the CFP. But that's where we are right now. Iowa falling to unranked Purdue, keeping it moving. The Savannah State Tigers, homecoming. Very, very successful for the Tigers, moving now to 6-1 and 5-0 in the conference. No, I'm sorry. 5-1. 5-0 in the conference play in the Southern Intercollegiate, the SIAC, Southern, you know what, they're in the SIAC. I don't even want to, you'll see a graphic pop up because sometimes I get dumb. My brain does things.
Okay. Oh my God, you are killing me today. Say it with me. Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. Did you get that? What was so hard about that? Oh my God, I swear to God.
Anyway, Savannah State is first in the SIAC East. They completely wipe out Clark Atlanta University for a homecoming crowd, 49-14. Now we're on to our next segment, ladies and gentlemen, and we are welcoming our sponsor, 1906 Tees. Heisman Hopefuls is sponsoring this segment. 1906 Tees. Go over and see my man Rick. He can get you hooked up with the gear. If you're in a Greek letter organization, he can hook you up with custom-made gear. You can go to his website and make your own custom gear. If you want something in your school colors, now he cannot do the logos because those are copywritten, but if you want a red and black shirt with a bulldog on it, with a Go Dogs, he can do that. If you want a blue and orange shirt with a tiger on it with a war eagle, he can do that for you. Go holler at him today. And he also has easy payment plans. I did not know this, but PayPal now has pay in 4 payments or pay in 2 payments, I believe, with PayPal. And the prices are pretty reasonable, so they won't break your pocket anyway. But if you're really that strapped for cash and you want some gear, my man Rick has got you. Go visit him at 1906tees.com today. Now, our next segment, Heisman Hopefuls. It's moving into week 8, ladies and gentlemen. And now not only are we watching very carefully win-loss records and who beat whom and who has claim to the throne. It's almost like Game of Thrones all over again. And who has the rightful claim to the throne to get into the CFP. They're also looking at, this is the time of year when we start talking about who's had a chance at winning the Heisman. And you recognize the names from the preseason favorites like Spencer Rattler. He was the front runner, but you also had Matt Corral, who we talked about, DJ Ukulele, Sam Howell, JT Daniels, Bryce Young, who we talked about, CJ Stroud, Derek King. Well, some things have happened between September 1st and now. And Derek King is out for the season with a bum shoulder. He's having surgery. JT Daniels got hurt in week 4. He hasn't played in 3 weeks. Spencer Rattler, as we all know, benched last week during Red River for Caleb Willams because Spencer had a shaky start. Caleb came in. He's energized the team. UNC and Clemson have just had they've just had some rough seasons this year. We don't even know if they're even going to get into their own conference playoffs, let alone the CFP, which is doubtful because I believe they both have 3 losses at this time. So even all of that notwithstanding, as of today's date, the front runners for the Heisman Trophy are Bryce Young from Alabama, Matt Corral from Ole Miss, CJ Stroud from Ohio State, running back Kenneth Walker III from Michigan State, and Mr. Robinson, who's a running back from Texas. I cannot even read my own handwriting, and I am sorry for that, Mr. Robinson. That will be in it. It's right there. Thank you, graphics people, for getting me straight. So those are your front runners right now for the Heisman Trophy moving into Week 8. Now, most of these guys are on some high-profile teams, and these are some of the same guys that were the front runners, but there's some other guys that I thought about, and I got to thinking about it. And I'm like, well, if the Heisman is kind of the equivalent of the NFL MVP, so to speak, the best all-around player in college football, there's some other players that we might want to consider potentially for Heisman consideration. Consider for consideration. That's repetitively redundant, but I digress. So here's my list that I put together. I got a few guys, and I'll be coming up with some guys every week. I'll be watching the games and looking at their performances and things like that, and just throw these out here to you. So here's my list for this week. Defensive lineman Jordan Davis from the University of Georgia. He's a senior. He is 6'6". He is 340 pounds. The kid's got a motor on him. He can move. You don't want to see him coming your way. If you're trying to break through the line of scrimmage, or if he gets in the backfield, you don't want to see this kid coming your way. Now, he has not had a whole bunch of stats. Like, he doesn't have a bunch of tackles. He doesn't have a bunch of sacks. He's not leading in any of those categories on his team. But what he does have is his size, his strength, and his sheer just speed to get through the line of scrimmage. I can't tell you how many times this season I've seen his hands breaking through the line of scrimmage right after the ball is sacked, soon to be followed by the rest of his 6'6" frame. We saw it happen all day yesterday. But here's the thing. He's getting double and triple teamed on many plays because the offensive just haven't figured out a way. Offenses have not figured out a way to shut this kid down. And when he does that, when you got to commit a second and a third guy, that leaves other guys accounted for, like these linebackers back here, Kobe Dean and Adam Anderson and Trayvon Walker and Nolan Smith. And those are guys that are racking up the tackles for loss and the sacks and breaking up plays at the line of scrimmage. Why? Because Jordan Davis, I keep wanting to call that guy Baker. Jordan Davis is just, he's hemming them up on the line of scrimmage. That is my first candidate. Now, these are in no particular order, ladies and gentlemen. Candidate number 2 is Caleb Willams. We talked about him earlier. He is a true freshman quarterback for the University of Oklahoma. This guy played no football last year. You've seen what he's done the last 2 weeks, yesterday and last week. This kid played no football last year. Why? COVID. He was a high school senior, got to play no football. Got his commitment to Oklahoma, came up. He's played a few snaps in garbage time this season, but he hasn't really seen any significant action until last week. Stepped into the offense and started running it like he wrote the plays. This kid is absolutely phenomenal, and he's a double threat because he can score on you with his arm or he can beat you with his feet. There was a play yesterday against TCU where he broke a couple of pairs of ankles on his on his way to the goal line. There was a 66-yard touchdown run where he shook a couple of guys on that 66-yard touchdown run in Red River. Just for frame of reference, he has doubled the offensive output in a game and a half. If you look at the stats before he came in last week to now and then go backwards, he's doubled that offensive output. Just to give you the stats, if you don't believe me, Spencer Rattler, up until he got benched, had thrown for 1,371 yards, and Caleb, in 1.5 games, has thrown for almost half that total, 609 yards. Now, if you add in the yardage that he's added with his feet, he has definitely doubled the yardage that Spencer Rattler has contributed to the offense. And not to mention, I don't know if you were paying attention, but when he came in the game last week, the offense lit up, the defense lit up, and even though they're still not on par with, say, a Georgia at that level of defense, they made the crucial stops when they needed to. And that's the thing that is indicative of somebody that is important to the team. Moving on to my next candidate, Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky, junior running back. Yes, I know we beat Kentucky yesterday. And yes, like I mentioned, the Georgia defense held him to 7 yards. But I want you to consider the fact that as of the taping of this show, he's still averaging 6.1 yards per carry and 775 yards this season. He's still on pace to be the leading rusher in the SEC. And if you don't think that is important, consider the fact that Georgia shut down the passing game yesterday as well. There wasn't much there on the passing game. And once they shut him down, Kentucky's offense was shut down. They were able to make a couple of drives and score, but they weren't able to do it consistently because they held him to 7 yards. So he's definitely been a key part of that offense that led them to that 6-1 record. And last but not least, on the Heisman hopeful list, sponsored by 1906 Tees, Kennedy Brooks, running back from Oklahoma. Yes, another Oklahoma guy. No, I'm not a homer. I live here in Oklahoma, and I get to see this team play more than any other team in the NCAA other than Georgia, just because go Dogs. 638 yards. Now, he's a few hundred behind Rodriguez, but as I mentioned before, Rattler has been inconsistent, not exactly the most productive quarterback this season, and I'm not trying to throw the kid under the bus. I'm sure he's a great kid and he's very talented. He's definitely doing better than I could do at the quarterback position. So I want to make sure I put that out there first. But when the passing game's not working, you got to turn to the run. And Kennedy Brooks has been sustaining the team on the ground. But now that you've got a double threat quarterback under center, who they don't know if he's going to run or he's going to pass, and now he's in 2 games, has now gotten his two favorite targets and his wide receivers. Now they're going to start keying up on Oklahoma receivers, which is going to open the run game even more. So if you think you've seen the last of Kennedy Brooks this season, think again, because Kennedy Brooks is definitely going to make a big splash in the next few weeks as Oklahoma tries to push towards a championship run. So moving on to our next segment, that was Heisman Hopefuls. We're on to our next segment, ladies and gentlemen. We've talked about it on the show on Thursday nights. I've touched on it here and there in a review, but we're bringing back the segment, the one that we started out talking about, the coaches that have struggled this year, that have been on the struggle bus. And these coaches we're about to talk to you about are not only on the hot seat, they're definitely. So we're going to start this thing off. We're going to talk about Manny Diaz from Miami. It's not just the embarrassing loss to Bama, because everybody says they're going to beat Bama, and just about everybody that has said that has gotten beaten. There's only been a small handful of teams that have been able to say that they smack talked Bama and backed it up. So it's not the embarrassing loss to Bama. It's not the loss to Michigan State. At this point right now, Michigan State and Bama are both ranked, and Michigan State, if they keep winning, could potentially inch a little closer. Even if they don't get into the playoffs, will probably get a good New Year's Six bowl at the bare minimum if they're able to make a splash in the Big Ten. So it's not those two games, and you can't really hold those against him. You can even say that when Derek King went down to have shoulder surgery and it was out for the season, you could say, we'll give him a pass there too. But it's the rest of everything. It is the inconsistencies with the offense, the inconsistencies with the defense and special teams play. They are currently 2-4 right now. And that's just they're 2-4 right now. Maybe 2-5. Yeah, they played on week 1, unless they had a bye, which I missed, which I may have missed. So right now, what I got was 2-4. They're 2-4 right now, and they just had back-to-back conference losses, which is never a good thing, ever. To two also unranked teams who are not even going to sniff the conference championship. So basically, Manny Diaz, I feel for you, man. It feels like you've been just kind of dealt. You've had a rough hand dealt your way this season, but you got to get something going because you, sir, are definitely. All right, that brings me to our next coach on the list, and you've heard me talk about this guy since week 1, Scotty Too Hottie Frost. He's still on the struggle bus, y'all. Still on the struggle bus. His record overall is 3-5. He's 1-4 in conference play. And he was quoted yesterday. This is a direct quote before their game with Minnesota. He said, "We are going to put, quote, everything we've got, end quote, into this matchup." And yeah, that didn't happen because they lost 30-23 to the Golden Gophers. Now, to be fair, the Golden Gophers are no slouches this year. They've got 4-5 wins, and they're probably not going to win the conference, but they're definitely good enough that they're going to post a winning record this year. But Scott Frost, the only thing I think that's saving Scott Frost right now is the fact that he's got a $20 million buyout. Yes, $20 million. And his salary is about $5 million a year. So he might get one more year, but if he doesn't get it together next year, or he has a couple of more embarrassing losses, because there's still weeks of football left to play, folks, he might wind up getting the axe. So Scott Frost, even though you got a huge buyout, you're not out of the woods yet. You are definitely. That brings me to the last coach on this list, and this one makes me really sad. Everybody was in love with this coach just a mere 21 months ago. He and his LSU Tigers ran the table and won the national championship, and his quarterback was a first-round draft pick. And it's just been, everything went to hell in a handbasket after that. They've been on the struggle bus ever since. Coach Ed Orgeron, we did say earlier in the year that he was the #1 candidate for being Livin On The Edge, but the announcement was made earlier today and was confirmed that Ed Orgeron, Mr. Go Tigers himself, will not be returning after the season, and he will be receiving his full $17 million buyout. Now, I know if you're saying to yourself, well, if LSU can afford to buy Ed Orgeron out, why can't Nebraska? Hey, look, Nebraska does not have that LSU money. Trust and believe me, honey. Now, the thing that makes me sad, the most sad, is that I, even as a Georgia fan, got drawn in to his charisma and that raspy voice. And when he talked every press conference, it makes me very sad that after this season, we will never get to hear Ed Orgeron say, "Go Tigers," after the post-game interview. Coach, wherever you wind up, we wish you the best of luck, whether you wind up retiring and whether you wind up with another program. But unfortunately, 1.5 seasons of has brought your career at LSU to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that concludes this week's Week 7 review from This Is SEC Football. It has been my honor and my privilege to be your host this evening on behalf of myself and my co-host, Mr. Sean, the Shoutout King Spencer. We will be back on Thursday with a live broadcast. Hit us up on the live broadcast on Let's Talk College Football. It's between 6 and 7 Eastern on Thursday night. Many thanks to our sponsors, DJG Enterprises and 1906 Tees, on behalf of myself and Sean Spencer. This has been your Week 7 NCAA football review, and I am out. Holla.
Be sure to like and subscribe for content and more
On your new home for podcasts and independent music.
on the Zagnif One Radio Network.
But seriously, who brings mustard to a podcast recording?